What made you wake up to climate change, and what or who made you become an activist?
I originally started my entire movement into activism when I found out GMOs. And GMOs are genetically modified organisms, and it's a process in agriculture. And when I found out about GMOs, I became extremely concerned about the health and environmental risks that they pose to our entire world, really. But on top of that, I started finding out about the pesticides and herbicides and fertilizers that they are using with these genetically modified foods and how they're really damaging our soil. And when our soil is damaged, it actually releases carbon into our atmosphere, contributing further to the climate crisis. So when I found out about GMOs and the entire industrial agriculture system and that it really contributes 44 to 57% of all greenhouse gas emissions globally, I felt the need to stand up and to start to say something about the climate. And it's been incredible to watch the entire climate movement grow, especially in the past couple of years with the youth movement.
Were there key environmental figures that made you become a change activist?
I started my GMO activism at age 11, and without many figures at the time that I really looked up to. I've always looked up to, Jane Goodall and Vandana Shiva, the typical women activists who are really making incredible change in the world. But I started activism out of my own personal rage, I think, and my desire to want to make a difference in the world after seeing injustices really being done to humans, to our environment, to nature at the end of the day. And so I stood up, and as I continued into climate activism through my fight for transparency in our food system, I started to follow more closely the work of many leaders such as and David Suzuki, who I all look up to very dearly, and who have shaped the way that I look at activism in our world.
How would you rename climate change?
I think I would rename it climate pollution. I think climate change is definitely the most clear choice as of right now. But I think climate pollution is also an interesting avenue to look at simply because even people who don't believe in climate change, you can't deny that we are polluting our earth. You can't deny that we are destroying nature. You can't deny that fossil fuels are releasing emissions. So, whether you believe in climate change or not, I think that climate pollution offers this availability to say, hey, look, even if you don't believe in climate change, we can all make a difference to protect our world for generations to come. And it opens up the doors to people who may not necessarily know about this issue.
Do you communicate with other climate change activists? And if so, how do you communicate and find out about each other?
So I've been honored to know many climate change activists through my 8 years of activism now. And we meet mostly at conferences, at rallies, at events where we're all sort of speaking out about the same issues. And we communicate mostly through Twitter, through email. Social media is, I think, the main way that we all use to communicate. And it's offered us this incredible platform where we can connect with climate activists around the world that generations before us didn't have. I can click one button and be in communication with someone in Africa or in India. And it allows us to create this global community that we really are lucky to have and allows us to movement build more than ever.
Are you in touch with Greta Thunberg? Have you connected, messaged, tweeted with Greta?
So we are Twitter friends. So we've retweeted each other a couple of times, and we're friends on Twitter. We follow each other. But again, we're all so busy in this movement, and especially Greta at this point, she's just in such a public light, which is incredible. She's helping all climate activists right now to spread this message further and to be able to really wake up politicians, our governments, corporations. And so at this point in time, she's so incredibly busy. And I think we're all feeling that busyness as well with the climate change movement growing and expanding more than ever.
How can you safeguard your movement and activism from commercial interests?
This is a really interesting question. I've had experiences with corporations trying to basically jump off of my platform or to use myself or other climate activists as sort of a talking piece. There are a lot of corporations and even governments that want to get on board with the idea of climate change and make themselves seem like they're environmentally friendly and climate smart. But at the end of the day, they use this as a tool to bring in more consumers and to sell more product or to get more people to vote for them. And I've had to turn down some amazing opportunities simply because I don't want to allow myself to become a part of this idea of greenwashing, allowing corporations to use us as climate activists simply to benefit themselves at the end of the day. And it's clear to see who's doing this. I mean, even the Canadian government, we voted for Justin Trudeau off of the basis that he was going to help Indigenous women and children who were missing. And we voted for him because he promised a lot about climate change. And as he's talking about climate change and he's talking about issues with helping the environment, he bought a pipeline. So it's really ironic to see the differences. And I think we have to stop this idea of greenwashing and not align ourselves with governments and with corporations that do not fully register with our ideas, our plans for making the world a better place.
What are key actions one can take to combat climate change?
Well, there's a lot that we can do. I focus on regenerative agriculture as one of the main ways to combat climate change. We obviously need to cut down on oil and fossil fuels. This is an incredible action that we can take, and we need to tell our governments that enough is enough. We need to tell our corporations to say you need to turn to a more sustainable system of working, but we also need to address one of the key leading causes of climate change, which is agriculture as well. And buying organic, buying regenerative foods that aren't contributing to this chemical industrialized way of making our food is one great way to do that, because it respects all life, it respects diversity, it respects nature, really putting our consumerism in check. And I think that's a big thing. It's really easy to blame governments and it's really easy to blame corporations. But at the end of the day, if we are supporting corporations and if we are supporting our governments that are not looking out for us, we're just as much a part of this issue. And so I think it's important now more than ever to realize what our habits do. And every day when we wake up, we have an incredible opportunity to make a difference in this world, even by voting with your dollar, even by choosing different foods, different clothing, different cosmetics, because your decisions really do impact the world that we're going to see in the future. Cutting out meat is another one, because our meat has such a strong impact on climate, such a strong impact on water use. Planting seeds and planting pesticide-free native plants, because we need to help our pollinators and also plants sequester carbon, so we can be greening more spaces and bringing in more carbon to our soil where it belongs. Working community gardens, reducing plastic, cutting down fast fashion. These are all things that I like to implement in my own life.
How do you think technology can help us through this crisis?
Technology obviously offers some benefits. And as I was mentioning, social media has been an incredible technology that allows us to connect with each other, to work on this global stage. But I don't think that technology is the end all. And of course, different technologies like solar or thermal that will be able to cut down on some of the oil and fossil fuel systems is definitely beneficial. But we also have to understand that the reason we're getting to the point where we need those technologies is because we've destroyed our planet to this extent. So we're almost coming up with band-aid solutions by only looking at technology to cover up the issues that we've created. I think we really need to go back to nature and understand that we are all a part of nature, we are all a part of the climate, and start taking action from the root up, and understanding that our food can be a part of that, our choices can be a part of that, and working together on this stage where we can really create real action, and not just sort of the Band-Aid effect, as I mentioned.
What are future technologies you know about which could save us?
As I mentioned, solar and thermal are good ways. I think as we continue to develop in this climate movement, more solutions are going to be coming our way. And we're seeing electric cars, we're seeing some solutions already that are newer than ever. But as I mentioned, I really do think that we need to reattach ourselves to our roots, create a culture of kindness and peace that really extends to our planet as well, and not create solutions that are based off of the very problems that we're trying to cover up. And so I think we need to, again, focus on the root of the issues. And that's the biggest thing for me. Agriculture, fossil fuels, moving away from those systems to technologies, for instance, such as solar and thermal that can help us solve that, but also pulling down carbon at the same time in organic and regenerative ways. What made you wake up to climate change, and who or what made you become an activist?
Well, living in Southern California, we don't get a whole lot of weather here. And growing up as a kid, I was very interested in thunderstorms, rainstorms, windstorms, heat waves. I would really get super excited about them. Uh, Around 2015, when I was 15 years old, I started to realize that the averages that that government agencies such as the National Weather Service were saying for our town were not the averages that I saw in the weather. It always seemed to be warmer than average. In October 2015, during a very massive heat wave, I realized that the warmer than average weather we have been seeing wasn't just a mistake that from a different weather station or whatnot. It was really that climate change was impacting my region more than I expected. We were warming a lot faster than the rest of the world simply because we have a severe case of the urban heat island effect here in Los Angeles, where all the concrete in the urban forests keep heat in at night and help to warm up the atmosphere when the sun rises in the morning. And so we're seeing a lot more heat in the city than we used to, and it really kind of caught me off guard because I wasn't expecting such extreme changes in that I was born to, such extreme changes that I entered the world to. In 2017, also during October, there was another heat wave just after the World Series. This heat wave was something completely different. That night after the Dodgers lost, temperatures didn't drop below 90 degrees the entire night. Humidity levels were below 10%, and every time the wind blew, it was very heavy that night, it felt as though someone was breathing on me. The conditions that night for a major wildfire to rip through any given Los Angeles neighborhood were absolutely perfect. It scared me. And a fire did rip through Santa Rosa, California that day, which is in Northern California. The fact that entire towns in California are burning down like left and right is really scaring me. And it was on that night that I really realized that climate change is hurting all of us today. No matter how wealthy, no matter what country you live in, no matter what your social status is, it's affecting everyone. And it's an issue that we really need to solve.
Were there key environmental figures that made you become a climate change activist?
On the top of my head, not really. When I first became interested in climate change, it was because of all the extreme weather that I kept seeing month after month. Whether it was massive wildfires that would rain ash in my backyard, or it was major heat waves that would kill nearly every plant that we had, it was really the extreme weather that got me focused on climate change. In recent months, there's been a whole slew of new activists, such as Greta Thunberg and myself, and a whole bunch of these school strikers that have really been a lot of inspiration for a lot of the writing and activism that I do. But I don't think at the time there was really anyone that got me interested in climate change. It was seeing the drastic impacts in our own weather. I'm only 18 years old. Being an 18-year-old, I shouldn't see the climate changing throughout my life. That's if I were, which I am, that's really bad news because the animals around here can't evolve in time. We've just got out of a major drought, and all these animals they can't survive after even though the rains are back. There's no food left. All the trees have been killed. All the other animals have been killed. Everything is finding refuge in the city. And so seeing the climate change so quickly in such a small amount of time, in such a small region, really woke me up to this issue.
How would you rename climate change?
I don't think I would rename climate change. The reason being is that so often so-called climate deniers like to use the fact that we've already kind of changed the name from global warming to climate change as bait to troll us. And I think it's really unfortunate because climate change is the name of this whole issue. It's the main thing that people hear. It's the number one word when we talk about this issue. And so it has the power to hold a lot of messaging. And so the very fact that it's kind of tricky to change it, it's really kind of unfortunate. If I were to change it, I would to change it to either anthropomorphic climate change, meaning human-caused climate change, or accelerated climate change, to imply that this climate change isn't like other climate change. Normally, when the Earth changes through natural cycles, it's a very slow meander. Over hundreds of years, you might not be able to tell that anything has changed at all. Over thousands, things will change. This era of climate change is different. We're seeing the climate change in some places every 10 years. That is catastrophic for the ecosystems, for forests, for coral reefs, for the entire food web of the world. And so I think accelerated climate change would be a good name to rename climate change, because people don't understand that this isn't something normal. This is something that is off the charts. This is something that Earth has not seen for 65 million years when a major meteor struck the planet. This could induce a mass extinction event, and it needs to be treated as such.
Do you communicate with other climate change activists? And if so, how do you communicate and find out about each other?
Well, I tend to talk a lot about statistics, and so when people talk to me about climate change, I do kind of bore them with all my statistics about climate change in Pasadena. Though I do somewhat communicate with a lot of climate activists, but a lot of climate activism is individual because, if we want to solve climate change, we have to change our individual lifestyles. We have to change our individual meat consumption, water consumption, what we use, what we recycle, what we reduce. And so I think it's important for a lot of climate activists to express how individual this issue should be for everyone. And so I do communicate with a lot of climate change activists, but I'm not really one to collaborate with a lot about them. I mostly talk with people on Twitter. I'm retweeted by people. I retweet other people and try and get the word around. And I'm really excited to see that almost every climate activist I see today is either a person of color, a woman, or both. And that's amazing. And at the same time, it's kind of sad. I'm one of the few white male activists that I can see. And I really think that it's kind of resonates with how climate change affects people and affects different communities on different scales. We know for a fact that climate change is affecting poorer communities far more worse than it's affecting wealthy communities. If we are to help other communities who are affected more by climate change, this will really help us solve this issue much more. It's This issue is partially about communication because it's about how humans interact with each other. It's how we interact with our environment. But it's also about individualism. We can't depend on one another to solve climate change for each other. We can't depend on a hero to emerge from the fog to save us all. And so all of us need to do our part, but at the same time, all of us need to work together. And so when I communicate with climate activists, I think about that a lot. I think about how can I work together with this activist, but also how can I maintain my individuality when I'm, you know, collaborating with this person.